The screams echoed through Astral Technologies as servers crashed. Executives fled the crisis room in panic, careers dissolving with each passing second. No one noticed Mike Reynolds, the janitor who quietly stepped in, typed a few commands, and restored $1 million system in seconds. For the first time in 5 years, Alexandra Morgan, the formidable CEO, looked directly into the eyes of the man who'd been invisible until today, the moment when fate decided their separate worlds would collide in ways neither could have imagined. In the early hours before sunrise, Mike Reynolds moved quietly through his modest Brooklyn apartment, careful not to wake his 7-year-old daughter, Emma. At 40, his face carried the gentle lines of someone who smiled often despite life's hardships. Once a brilliant software engineer, Mike now wore the gray uniform of Astral Technologies' maintenance staff, a career change he'd made 3 years ago when his wife Sarah died unexpectedly from a brain aneurysm. The corporate hours had been impossible to manage while raising Emma alone. And the janitorial position offered flexibility and stability, if not prestige. He prepared Emma's lunchbox with the same precision he once applied to coding. A peanut butter sandwich cut into stars, apple slices arranged in a perfect circle, and a handwritten note with a small math puzzle. These little connections mattered more than any career. As he brushed Emma's auburn hair, so like her mother's, he whispered their morning mantra, smart, kind, and brave, that's how we face each day. Emma repeated the words sleepily, leaning into his touch with complete trust. On the other side of the Brooklyn Bridge, in a sleek Manhattan penthouse, Alexandra Morgan reviewed quarterly projections while her personal trainer counted her through a punishing set of exercises. At 35, she was the youngest CEO in Astral's history, having climbed from programmer to executive through relentless determination. Her father, a federal judge, and her mother, a renowned surgeon, had disowned her 6 months ago when she refused to marry Richard Blackwell, the son of their closest friends and her ex-boyfriend of 2 years. The final confrontation had been ugly. "You choose career over family, then you are no family of ours," her father had declared. What they didn't know, what no one at Astral knew, was that Alexandra was 16 weeks pregnant with Richard's child. When she'd told him, he'd laughed, suggested termination, and when she refused, he blocked her number. Now, she hid her small bump under structured blazers and loose blouses, determined that her pregnancy would not define her leadership. Alexandra dismissed her trainer and stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows, one hand unconsciously resting on her stomach, as she surveyed the city she'd conquered professionally while feeling increasingly alone personally. "We don't need anyone," she whispered to her unborn child, trying to believe it herself. As Mike dropped Emma at school with a tight hug and their secret handshake, 3 squeezes meaning "I love you," Alexandra strode into Astral's glass headquarters, her team scrambling to keep pace as she fired questions about the imminent launch of FinSight, their revolutionary financial management software. Neither could have imagined how their separate worlds would collide that very day. How the invisible barriers of corporate hierarchy were about to shatter through a crisis that would reveal what truly mattered beyond titles and appearances. The crisis began at 10:17 in the morning. Mike was replacing light fixtures on the executive floor when alarms blared through the building. Through the glass walls of the main conference room, he saw dozens of programmers and executives staring in horror at the main projection screen, which displayed only the ominous message: "System failure. All data corrupted." He recognized the symptoms immediately. It was the same catastrophic error that had nearly bankrupted his previous employer before he'd developed a fix. For 5 minutes, he watched the chaos unfold, debating whether to speak up. These people had never even made eye contact with him. Would they listen now? He thought of Emma, of their rent due next week, of the stability this job provided them. Better to stay invisible than risk everything on pride. But as he turned to leave, he caught sight of a young programmer barely out of college with tears streaming down her face as years of her work disappeared. Before he could second-guess himself, Mike set down his tools and approached the conference room door. Alexandra maintained composure as her chief technology officer, James Peterson, explained the disaster. "The main server cluster has crashed. We've lost access to the entire FinSight codebase and all client data. Recovery will take weeks, possibly months." The board members attending virtually began disconnecting in disgust. Astral's stock would plummet by morning. Alexandra felt a flutter from her baby, a cruel reminder that now, more than ever, she couldn't afford to fail. The company needed to launch FinSight on schedule, or their investors would pull out. Her position, her independence, her ability to provide for her child, everything hung in the balance. She forced her voice to remain steady. "Options, people. I need options, not explanations." The room fell silent, her team defeated before they'd even begun to fight. That's when she noticed the maintenance worker hovering by the door, an odd expression of concentration on his face. When Mike finally entered the room, the sudden silence was deafening. "Excuse me," he said softly, "but I think I can help." James Peterson scoffed openly. "Unless you can mop up corrupted data, we don't need janitorial assistance." Several executives chuckled nervously, but Alexandra raised her hand for silence. Desperation made her willing to entertain any possibility. "What's your name?" she asked. "Mike Reynolds, ma'am. I was a software engineer at DataPrime before." He hesitated, before coming to Astral. "This looks like a recursive corruption in the database indexing. I've seen it before." Alexandra studied him for 3 long seconds before nodding toward an empty terminal. "Show me." As Mike sat down, she noticed his hands calloused from manual labor but moving with the practiced precision of someone who understood technology intimately. A man of contradictions, just like the path her own life had taken. The room watched in stunned silence as Mike's fingers flew across the keyboard, executing complex command sequences from memory. 23 minutes later, the screens flickered and the database structure reappeared. A cheer erupted as programmers verified that the data was intact. Alexandra stood speechless, watching not the screens but the janitor who had just saved her company millions. When their eyes met across the room, something shifted in her carefully controlled world. For the first time in months, Alexandra felt a spark of something beyond professional satisfaction, a reminder that people were more than the roles assigned to them. "Mr. Reynolds," she said formally, "I believe we need to talk." As she led him to her office, Alexandra noticed how the same executives who had ignored Mike for years now watched him with newfound respect. How quickly perception could change when someone proved their value. The thought settled uncomfortably as she realized her own guilt in never looking beyond his uniform. 2 days after the server incident, Alexandra reviewed Mike's personnel file in her office. Before becoming a janitor, he had indeed been a senior engineer at DataPrime, with patents to his name and glowing performance reviews. His abrupt career change, following his wife's death, was explained in a brief note from HR. Candidate overqualified but requested position due to family circumstances. Needs flexible hours for childcare. Alexandra felt an unexpected kinship with this man whose personal life had forced professional compromise, something she herself now faced with her pregnancy. She thought of her own future, the challenges of balancing leadership with motherhood, and wondered if she too would eventually need to step back from the career she'd sacrificed everything to build. The thought terrified her almost as much as the idea of raising a child alone. That afternoon, she found herself walking to the maintenance area, a part of the building she'd never visited. She found Mike replacing a broken door handle, his daughter sitting nearby on a folding chair, intensely focused on a math workbook. "Mr. Reynolds," Alexandra began formally, "I'd like to offer you a consulting position on the FinSight project. Your skills are clearly being wasted in maintenance." Mike looked up, surprised, then glanced at Emma. "I appreciate that, Miss Morgan, but my schedule would remain flexible," Alexandra interjected. "You'd work when you can, for triple your current salary." She found herself adding, "without planning to, and your daughter would be welcome in the office when necessary." The word surprised her. Alexandra Morgan was not known for accommodating personal circumstances. Yet something about Mike's quiet dignity and obvious devotion to his child had broken through her usual detachment. Emma looked up at the mention of herself, studying Alexandra with curious eyes. "Are you the boss lady?" she asked with disarming directness. Alexandra was startled. Few people spoke to her so plainly. "Yes, I suppose I am the boss lady." Emma nodded sagely. "My daddy says you're very smart but that you need to smile more." Mike's face flushed with embarrassment, but Alexandra surprised herself by laughing genuinely for the first time in weeks. "Your daddy might be right about that, Emma." As she walked away, Alexandra felt the baby move again, stronger this time, as if approving of this unexpected connection. She placed her hand on her stomach, hidden beneath her tailored jacket, and wondered if motherhood would soften her hard edges, or if she'd become even more formidable protecting her child in this cutthroat world. Over the next 2 weeks, Mike divided his time between maintenance duties and consulting on FinSight, working late after Emma went to sleep in the small break room Alexandra had converted into a temporary workspace for him. One night, passing by at 10:30, Alexandra found him asleep at the keyboard, lines of code reflecting on his glasses. Without thinking, she placed her suit jacket over his shoulders, a gesture of kindness she hadn't extended to anyone in years. When he stirred, she quickly retreated, but not before he glimpsed her silhouette and the now visible curve of her pregnancy in her fitted dress. The moment hung between them, unacknowledged but significant, her vulnerability exposed, his perception forever altered. In that unguarded moment, they saw each other as they truly were, two people navigating difficult circumstances with quiet determination. The next morning, Alexandra found a cup of ginger tea on her desk with a note. Helps with morning sickness. Used to swear by it. She should have been angry at the personal intrusion, but instead felt strangely seen not as CEO, not as a Morgan, but simply as a woman facing a challenging journey alone. When Mike came to report on his progress that afternoon, neither mentioned the tea or her condition, but a silent understanding had formed between them. They spoke of code architectures and security protocols. But beneath the professional exchange lay a foundation of mutual respect that transcended corporate hierarchy. For the first time since learning of her pregnancy, Alexandra felt a small ember of hope that perhaps she wasn't entirely alone after all. Emma became a frequent presence at Astral, coloring quietly during meetings or helping the receptionists with simple tasks. The child's natural charm won over even the most serious executives. And Alexandra found herself looking forward to Emma's innocent observations about corporate life. "Why does everyone run when you walk down the hall?" Emma asked her one day. "They're busy people," Alexandra explained. Emma shook her head wisely. "Daddy says running means you didn't plan properly." From the mouths of babes came wisdom that made Alexandra reconsider her leadership style. Perhaps fear wasn't the most effective motivator after all. She began scheduling proper breaks during meetings, providing actual lunches instead of expecting her team to eat at their desks. Small changes that inexplicably improved productivity rather than hindering it. 3 weeks before the FinSight launch, disaster struck again. James Peterson called an emergency meeting to announce that critical security flaws had been discovered in the platform's code. "We have no choice but to delay the launch by at least 3 months, he declared. Shooting a smug glance at Mike, who had been invited to these meetings as a consultant despite James's objections. Alexandra felt the blood drain from her face. The board had been clear, another delay would cost her the CEO position. As executives argued loudly about damage control, she noticed Mike quietly reviewing code on his tablet, his expression troubled. His calmness amid the chaos drew her attention. She'd seen that focused look before, when he'd solved the server crisis. Perhaps there was more to this situation than met the eye. "Mr. Reynolds." She interrupted the chaos. "You have something to add?" The room fell silent as Mike stood, uncomfortable in the spotlight. "This security flaw wasn't here last week," he said quietly. "Someone introduced it deliberately within the past 3 days." The accusation hung in the air like a thundercloud. James Peterson's face contorted with rage. "Are you suggesting sabotage?" "By whom?" "Perhaps the janitor who conveniently became our savior." Others shifted uncomfortably, their loyalties divided. Alexandra felt her carefully constructed world tilting on its axis. "I need proof, not accusations," she said firmly, looking directly at Mike. "Can you find it?" He met her gaze steadily, no false promises, no grandstanding. "Yes," he said simply. "But you'll need to trust me." In that moment, Alexandra realized the irony. She was placing the company's future in the hands of a man who scrubbed its toilets. And yet, she'd never felt more confident in a decision. That night, as the office emptied, Alexandra remained in her glass-walled office, watching Mike work tirelessly at his terminal. At midnight, Emma asleep on the break room couch, he appeared at Alexandra's door with evidence. The security flaw had been introduced using James's credentials at 2:18 in the morning, a time when James was documented on security cameras at a downtown club. Someone had used his login, but it wasn't James himself. "I don't think he was the mastermind," Mike explained. "His ambition makes him an easy target. Someone wanted the launch to fail, someone with more to gain." He showed her the elegant but malicious code, explaining the technical details in terms she could understand without condescension. His respect for her intelligence, despite her non-engineering background, struck Alexandra as particularly rare. Most men in tech either oversimplified to the point of insult or deliberately obscured explanations to maintain power. Mike did neither. Alexandra paced her office, one hand resting on her growing belly, a gesture she'd caught herself making more frequently. "Richard," she whispered, the pieces clicking into place. Her ex-boyfriend worked for their main competitor. She'd suspected industrial espionage before but lacked proof. Mike looked at her questioningly, and without planning to, Alexandra found herself revealing everything: her relationship with Richard, her pregnancy, her family's rejection. Words flowed like a dam breaking. Years of perfect composure crumbling under the weight of shared vulnerability. "I built this company to prove myself to them, my parents, Richard, everyone who said a woman couldn't lead in tech. And now I'm about to lose everything because I refused to make the right choice." She hadn't intended to expose so much of herself, yet somehow, in this quiet midnight hour, with only Mike and her unborn child as witnesses, the truth demanded to be spoken. When she finished, Mike simply nodded. "Emma asks about her mother every day," he said softly. "It doesn't get easier, but you get stronger. And your child becomes your compass. He shared how Sarah's death had forced him to redefine success, how a flexible schedule to attend Emma's school events meant more than a prestigious title or corner office. I'm still an engineer, he said, gesturing to the code on his screen. A different environment doesn't change who I am or what I know. Just like being a mother won't erase who you are as a leader. It just adds another dimension. His words resonated with unexpected clarity, offering Alexandra a vision of motherhood that didn't require sacrificing her identity, or ambitions merely reshaping them around what truly mattered. For the first time, since the pregnancy test turned positive, Alexandra felt tears forming. Mike respectfully looked away, giving her the privacy to compose herself. We can fix this, he said simply, turning back to his computer. Not just the code, all of it. But you need to trust me. In that moment, Alexandra realized that she already did trust this man she'd barely noticed for years, perhaps more than anyone in her carefully curated professional circle. His integrity shone through everything he did, from the meticulous way he maintained the building to his gentle guidance of Emma to his brilliant problem-solving under pressure. As she watched him work, she placed both hands on her stomach, making a silent promise to her child. I will be the kind of leader, the kind of person who sees beyond surfaces and values substance. Who recognizes worth wherever it appears. Over the next 72 hours, Mike and Alexandra worked relentlessly to secure the platform and identify the saboteur. They traced the breach to Richard's company and documented everything for legal action. During breaks, Mike would check on Emma, and increasingly, Alexandra would join them. She found herself enchanted by the little girl's curiosity and Mike's infinite patience. One evening, Emma asked innocently, "Is your baby a boy or a girl?" Alexandra, startled by the direct question, admitted she didn't know yet. "I hope it's a boy," Emma declared confidently. "Then I can teach him things. Big sisters are supposed to teach things." The simple acceptance of her pregnancy, the assumption that her child would be part of their world, touched Alexandra deeply. No judgment, no awkward questions about a father's absence, just pure childlike embrace of a new life. Alexandra felt something within her soften, a protective wall beginning to crumble in the face of such innocence. As they worked side by side, Alexandra discovered surprising things about Mike. Despite his current position, he kept up with the latest developments in software engineering through online courses taken after Emma was asleep. His modest apartment contained an impressive library of technical books alongside children's stories. And most surprisingly, he harbored no bitterness about his career detour, viewing it instead as a necessary adaptation to life's circumstances. Everything is code, in a way, he explained once, fixing a temperamental coffee machine while they discussed database architecture. Input, process, output. Life throws unexpected inputs at you. The process, how you handle it, determines your output. I just rewrote my function to prioritize Emma. His practical philosophy struck Alexandra as profoundly wise, lacking the self-importance of the motivational speakers who charged thousands for corporate retreats. With 1 week until the launch, Alexandra made two momentous decisions. First, she would no longer hide her pregnancy, replacing her concealing wardrobe with clothes that embraced her changing body. Second, she would promote Mike to Director of Product Security with a salary that reflected his true value, a position created specifically for his unique combination of skills and perspective. When she presented the offer, Mike hesitated. "The maintenance position gives me flexibility for Emma," he explained. Alexandra found herself saying, "Bring her to work when needed. This building has an entire empty floor. We could create a small daycare for employees' children." The words surprised her, even as she spoke them. Yet another way, this unexpected connection was transforming her vision for the company she led. The corporate world had trained her to see employees as resources, personal lives as inconvenient distractions from productivity. Now she saw the potential for a different approach, one that recognized humans as whole beings with responsibilities beyond their desks. When she announced both decisions to her executive team, reactions were mixed. Some welcomed her authenticity, while others questioned whether pregnancy hormones had clouded her judgment. A janitor in senior management? A daycare in a tech company? What's next? Nap time for programmers? One board member scoffed. Alexandra smiled with newfound confidence. Actually, research shows short naps improve cognitive function and problem-solving abilities. I'll add that to the proposal. She left them speechless, drawing strength from the small life growing within her and the integrity of the man who'd shown her that leadership could take many forms. As she walked through the office afterward, Alexandra noticed employees looking at her differently, not with the usual fear or calculated deference, but with something approaching genuine respect. By embracing her authentic self, she'd somehow become more authoritative, not less. The morning of the FinSight launch arrived with a media frenzy outside the Plaza Hotel. Financial reporters speculated about Astral's revolutionary platform, while gossip columnists whispered about the CEO's visible pregnancy and absent partner. Alexandra stood backstage in a tailored maternity dress that accentuated rather than hid her 6-month belly, reviewing her notes one last time. Mike appeared beside her, almost unrecognizable in his new suit, Emma holding his hand in her party dress. "Ready, boss lady?" the child asked, with a grin that echoed her father's. Alexandra laughed, the sound still unfamiliar but increasingly natural. "Ready as I'll ever be, Miss Emma." They formed an unlikely trio, the pregnant CEO, the former janitor, and the precocious 7-year-old, yet somehow it felt right, this blending of professional purpose and personal connection. Alexandra realized with sudden clarity that success would mean nothing without people who genuinely cared whether you achieved it. The presentation began with Alexandra confidently addressing the packed ballroom. "Today, Astral Technologies doesn't just launch a new platform. We launch a new philosophy about how technology should serve human needs, all human needs, including those we too often overlook." She placed a hand on her belly, acknowledging what everyone could see. Life is messy. Careers don't follow straight lines. Families come in all configurations. Our software was designed with this reality in mind. The audience, initially buzzing about her appearance, fell silent, captivated by her authenticity. Alexandra felt power flowing through her, not the brittle authority she'd wielded before, but something organic and genuine. This was leadership rooted in truth rather than image, and she could see its immediate impact on the riveted faces before her. When it came time for the technical demonstration, Alexandra departed from the script. Instead of calling James Peterson to the stage as planned, she introduced Mike Reynolds. The man who not only saved our platform but redefined how we think about talent at Astral. Confusion rippled through the crowd as this unknown figure took center stage. Mike began awkwardly, his voice soft after years of being unheard. But when he started explaining how FinSight could help single parents manage limited resources, speaking from lived experience rather than market research, the room leaned forward in collective attention. "We built this feature because I needed it myself," he admitted, showing how the platform could automatically calculate childcare costs against income and suggest optimal work hours. Life doesn't fit neat categories of business or personal. Real people need tools that recognize the complexity of their actual situations. His genuineness cut through the typical corporate polish, connecting with the audience on a human level that slick marketing could never achieve. As Mike demonstrated features designed for real people with complicated lives, Alexandra watched from the side, feeling the baby kick vigorously as if applauding his father's talent. The thought startled her, his father, where had that come from? Yet watching Mike's gentle competence, his humble brilliance finally recognized. She couldn't help imagining a different future than the lonely path she'd resigned herself to walking. Perhaps her child deserved not just her fierce protection but also the kind of steady, nurturing presence Mike provided Emma. Perhaps Alexandra herself deserved a partner who really saw her beyond the power suits and boardroom bravado. The possibility both terrified and exhilarated her as she stepped back on stage to conclude the presentation. The presentation concluded to thunderous applause. Financial analysts immediately upgraded Astral's stock rating. Journalists clamored for interviews with the mysterious Mike Reynolds, the janitor genius, as one headline would later dub him. Through it all, Mike stayed close to Emma, deflecting attention with the same humility that had defined his years of invisible work. Alexandra fielded questions with newfound warmth, speaking openly about her pregnancy when asked and deflecting personal questions about the father with practiced grace. "I'm focusing on my child's future, not my past," she stated firmly, shutting down the more invasive inquiries. Only Mike noticed how her hand trembled slightly as she said it, the barely perceptible sign of how deeply those wounds still ran. He moved subtly closer, not touching her but providing silent support through his presence alone. The gesture, small but significant, didn't go unnoticed by the more observant reporters. As the crowd thinned, Alexandra noticed an elderly couple standing near the exit. With a shock that sent the baby tumbling inside her, she recognized her parents. They approached hesitantly, her mother's eyes fixed on Alexandra's pregnant belly, her father's expression unreadable. "Alexandra," her mother began, voice wavering, "we saw you on the live stream. You were magnificent." The simple praise broke something inside her, the wall she'd built against their rejection. "Mother." "Father." She nodded formally, protective instincts on high alert. Her father cleared his throat. "We were wrong," he said simply, the words clearly costing him great effort. "Family should stand together, not apart. If you'll have us back in your life and our grandchild's life, we would be grateful." Alexandra stood frozen, the longing for reconciliation warring with the memory of their harsh judgment. She felt Mike's steady presence beside her, a reminder that forgiveness didn't erase the past but could transform the future. Before Alexandra could respond, Emma appeared at her side, looking up at the strangers curiously. "Are you the boss lady's mommy and daddy?" she asked. Alexandra's mother knelt despite her expensive suit, meeting the child at eye level. "Yes, we are. And who might you be, young lady?" Emma straightened importantly. "I'm Emma Reynolds. My daddy fixed the computers, and now he works with the boss lady. I'm going to be a big sister to her baby." The simple declaration, connecting them all in an unexpected web of relationships, brought tears to Alexandra's mother's eyes. Over Emma's head, Alexandra met Mike's gaze across the room, finding in it the strength to begin healing the deepest wound in her life. "Perhaps," she said carefully to her parents, "we could have dinner this weekend. To talk." Her father nodded, emotion visible in his usually stern face. "We would like that very much." As they exchanged contact information, Alexandra felt the baby move again, as if approving this tentative step toward family reunification. 2 months after the triumphant launch, Astral's headquarters had transformed. The previously empty 14th floor now housed a bright, cheerful daycare center where Emma spent afternoons after school alongside several employees' children. Mike's office adjoined Alexandra's, allowing for frequent collaboration as they expanded FinSight's capabilities. Though strictly professional during business hours, they had developed a routine of shared meals at Alexandra's penthouse or Mike's upgraded Brooklyn apartment, where Emma enthusiastically helped prepare dinner while peppering Alexandra with questions about the baby. These evenings had become Alexandra's anchor, a glimpse into family life she'd never experienced in her own achievement-oriented childhood. She found herself looking forward to Emma's chatter, to Mike's quiet humor, to the peaceful sense of belonging that enveloped her in their company. The corporate world had noticed the changes at Astral. Business publications praised the company's innovative approach to work-life balance, with the employee daycare and flexible scheduling becoming models for other tech firms. The janitor to director story had gone viral, inspiring conversations about hidden talent and the true nature of meritocracy. Alexandra had been featured in Working Mother magazines, becoming an unexpected icon for women navigating pregnancy and leadership roles. Through it all, she and Mike maintained a careful public friendship, neither confirming nor denying the speculation that swirled around their increasingly intertwined lives. What existed between them remained private, a delicate, growing connection neither was ready to label but both increasingly relied upon. On a snowy December evening, with Alexandra's due date just 3 weeks away, Mike arrived at her apartment to find her pacing in distress, hands supporting her lower back. "Braxton Hicks contractions won't stop," she explained tightly. "Doctor says it might be early labor." The calm competence with which Mike handled the crisis timing contractions, packing her hospital bag, arranging for Emma to stay with a neighbor made Alexandra realize how much she'd come to depend on his steady presence. In the hospital waiting room, as doctors monitored her condition, she found herself saying, "I'm naming him Michael. After you." Mike looked up, startled. "Alexandra, you don't have to, I want to," she interrupted. "You showed me I could be more than my job. That vulnerability isn't weakness. My son should carry the name of a truly good man." The words hung between them, weighted with unspoken emotion. Mike took her hand gently, his calloused fingers wrapping around her manicured ones in a tangible symbol of their worlds merging. "I'm honored," he said simply, the depth of feeling in his eyes saying everything words couldn't. The early labor scare passed, but something had shifted between them. The following Sunday morning, Mike and Emma arrived at Alexandra's penthouse for their now traditional weekend breakfast. As Alexandra showed Emma how to properly flip pancakes, a skill the CEO had surprisingly mastered, Mike watched them together, his expression thoughtful. When Emma left to set the table, he quietly placed a small box beside Alexandra's hand. Inside lay a simple silver pendant with 2 interconnected circles. "It's not expensive," he said softly, "but Sarah always said the symbol meant that separate lives can become something new together, without losing what makes them unique." Alexandra touched the necklace, understanding the magnitude of what he was offering not just to her, but to his daughter, to the memory of his wife. "I've never needed expensive," she whispered. "Just real." She lifted her eyes to his, seeing all the questions neither had dared to ask. "Help me put it on," she asked, turning to offer him the clasp. As his fingers brushed her neck, Alexandra felt certainty settle within her. This man, this child, the baby she carried, this was her true success story. As a January snowstorm blanketed the city 6 weeks later, Alexandra Morgan Reynolds sat in a rocking chair in the nursery of their Brooklyn brownstone, nursing newborn Michael while watching Emma build a snowman on the small back patio. Mike entered with mugs of hot chocolate, setting them down to adjust the blanket around his wife and son. No grand declarations had been necessary in the end, just the quiet recognition that the paths they'd been walking separately had somehow merged into one. Alexandra had resigned as CEO to become Astral's chairperson, a role that allowed her the family time she now valued above corporate power. From the practical lessons of career shifts and single parenthood, they had developed a workplace flexibility program that was revolutionizing Astral's corporate culture. The program bore the initials SEM for Sarah, Emma, and Michael, a tribute to the people who had shaped their journey toward a more compassionate vision of success. Emma came bursting in from the cold, cheeks rosy with excitement. "I made baby Michael a snow friend. He can see it from his window when he gets bigger." As Mike helped her out of her snow gear, Alexandra watched them together. This family created not from obligation or expectation, but from recognition of what truly mattered. The janitor and the CEO had seen beyond the uniforms and titles to the humans beneath. And in doing so, they had both been rescued from the loneliness of their separate struggles, finding strength in shared vulnerability and healing in unexpected love. Alexandra's parents had become regular visitors, their relationship still healing but growing stronger with each awkward, earnest effort. Richard had faced legal consequences for the corporate espionage, his company paying substantial damages that Alexandra had directed toward a foundation supporting single parents in tech. Every broken piece had somehow found its place in a new mosaic, more beautiful than the original design. The baby stirred against her chest, his tiny hand gripping her finger with surprising strength. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering the city in a blanket of white that made even the ordinary seem magical. Alexandra caught Mike's eye and smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes, the kind Emma had once said she needed more of. "What are you thinking?" he asked, settling beside them on the window seat. Alexandra leaned her head against his shoulder, contemplating the question. "I'm thinking that sometimes our greatest failures lead us exactly where we need to be," she answered. "If I hadn't been disowned, if you hadn't needed to change careers, we might never have found this." Mike nodded, understanding perfectly. "Input, process, output," he murmured with a smile, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Life writes the best code." As baby Michael drifted to sleep and Emma chattered about her snowman's carrot nose, Alexandra felt profound gratitude for the crisis that had forced her to look at the janitor who had ultimately saved not just her company, but her heart. Sometimes the most extraordinary journeys began with simply being seen.